Hello and welcome. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the dismissive avoidant attachment style and addictive patterns of behavior. So, we're going to cover what an addictive pattern of behavior really means, what it constitutes as, why we have these addictive patterns of behavior, why dismissive avoidants are actually statistically slightly more likely to have addictive patterns of behavior than some of our other attachment styles. And we're going to talk about how to actually shift out of some of these patterns with this awareness. And if you're the loved one of a dismissive avoidant, some things that you should be aware of or be mindful about that we'll cover at the end. So first and foremost, my favorite definition of what an addictive pattern actually is anything that we continuously repeat and have difficulty stopping despite negative consequences to our well-being. So, this doesn't have to be like, only substances or alcohol. This can be gambling. This can be love addiction to the wrong person. This can be, these creature comforts that we often talk about when we think of dismissive avoidant attachment style. And what you'll see is that dismissive avoidant attachment styles, they use creature comforts to self-soothe. And when I was running my practice and seeing a lot of people all the time, one pattern that actually stuck out to me fairly early on is how often people in relationships with dismissive avoidant attachment styles would say things like, my dismissive avoidant cares more about their car than they do our relationship, cares more about the boat than they do our relationship. And I would hear these references to a dismissive avoidance sort of preoccupation with like physical objects or things. But I would also say that under that category comes, things like television shows, movies, video games, gambling, hobbies. Like there can be this like really sort of strong fixation with those things as a dismissive avoidant. And you have to ask yourself, like, why? Why do we have anxious preoccupieds, for example, who will totally prioritize love and and romantic relationships, and then dismissive avoidants who almost like don't have that as much of a priority? The reality is it's an adaptation that a dismissive avoidant makes. If you grow up in a household in childhood where you are not getting your needs met from people, because one of the biggest factors that actually creates a dismissive avoidant attachment style is childhood emotional neglect. So if you're in a space where you don't have the proper attunement from parents or caregivers, you don't have your needs met emotionally, there's no real discussion or modeling for healthy emotional bonding at home, then of course you're more likely to be in a position where you, as an adaptation to the feelings of rejection from that environment, even if they're sort of flying under the radar, you're going to end up finding your relief by focusing on building relationships and focuses or hobbies with things rather than people. And so, we can see this as healthy things. We can see that sometimes a dismissive avoidant will be a great athlete or get really into their studies, or, be really interested in starting businesses. But the vast majority of the time, this actually ends up as a dismissive avoidant into modes of self-soothing, right? Like workaholism as a strategy for self-soothing, or playing hours and hours of games online as a strategy for self-soothing, or gambling, or we can go all the way down that sort of rabbit hole of what could be there. And what happens when a dismissive avoidant actually ends up using these creature comforts as a method of self-soothing is it gives them this temporary relief, going back to that definition of like addictive behaviors. But usually there's long-term consequences, right? Either extreme burnout from working too much, either being in a position, for example, where somebody may be spending all their money gambling, or their health is affected by substances or alcohol. So there can be these really strong downsides. And yet dismissive avoidants often have these addictive patterns of behavior because they have never really had healthy modeling for how to soothe beneath that. So if you look at the dismissive avoidance personality, what you'll see here is that they tend to go out of their way to avoid their emotions. Avoiding themselves and avoiding their emotions is a subconscious strategy to stay safe and to feel in control. Because as somebody who was taught or grew up in a household where there wasn't really healthy expression of emotions, essentially as a byproduct of that, the focus is to suppress emotions, not share your emotions, or really internalize everything that's taking place. And those emotions, even though dismissive avoidants are excellent repressors, they tend to have almost a special skill when it comes to repressing and disconnecting from their emotions. They can't do that forever, and it's not a sustainable strategy. And so eventually they cope by immersing themselves in distractions And it actually really affects their ability to stay present with themselves and with other people in their relationships and in their reality. And so when we look at, the mechanisms of how these things get programmed, what you'll see is that the subconscious mind essentially, when it, forms these relationships to the creature comforts, it sees these things as more positive than negative, right? And how we essentially make decisions all day long is because consciously plus subconsciously, whatever we're deciding, we perceive more benefits to doing that thing than we do drawbacks. And so if somebody grows up, they're not getting their needs met from their home, they numb the pain of not getting their emotional needs met at home with eating excess amounts of food all the time. Their subconscious mind builds these positive emotional associations. When I eat all this food, I feel distracted, maybe get a sugar high, maybe feel, very full and kind of tired. And then I'm not feeling bad any longer. I'm not feeling my heartache. I'm feeling this fatigue feeling. Instead, it gives me a little bit of relief from this pain that I was feeling or suffering I was feeling. And so that becomes a coping mechanism. And then even though we have these negative consequences, what that really illustrates, and I can't stress this enough, when somebody says like, oh, you can't break a behavior, anything, like we look at the definition here, anything we continuously repeat and have difficulty stopping despite negative consequences to our well-being, what that's illustrating at its core is a difference between your conscious and subconscious mind. It's illustrating that your conscious mind knows that this is no longer healthy, there are negative consequences, but your subconscious mind has already been programmed to see more good than bad in this harmful behavior. And so behind all of these addictive behaviors, self-sabotaging behaviors, there's always a need or set of needs that are being met. And what we have to be able to do when we're trying to break down these behaviors is find out at an individual level, what are those needs for us? For me as a person, what are the needs that I'm getting met through this coping mechanism? And so, for example, dismissive avoidance, right? Let's say a dismissive avoidant is binge eating food. And when they take a look at, okay, what needs does binge eating food meet for me? Maybe it's a form of escapism. Maybe it's a form of trying to feel in control because then you don't have to, it's kind of like you're stuffing down your feelings. There's a lot of discussion in eating disorder communities about this idea of stuffing, right? Pushing your feelings down with food. But really what it is like when you're eating a lot of the blood flow goes out of your brain, extremities, and gets more centralized in your digestive system, right? And so that can kind of make you feel less emotionally like you're feeling so much. And so there can be a sense of control being given back. Maybe somebody uses food as a form of comfort or safety. Or, funnily enough, when you think of your initial um, associations to food, they're often when you're being breastfed as a child. And so, what's happening while you're making these when a mother is breastfeeding their child, what ends up taking place is that there's a whole bunch of oxytocin being produced, which is the bonding neurochemical. So, maybe there's this sense of emotional connection that a dismissive avoidant gets from food when they're not getting it in different forms. And so when we look at what needs the addictive pattern is meeting, and then we can come up with upgraded strategies to meet our needs, we can take a big step towards moving into an addiction-free place. But then we also have to reprogram the emotional associations. So do you remember earlier how I said somebody who's caught in addictive patterns, they see more good than bad in that addictive pattern? And so we also have to look at, the costs of the addictive pattern and the benefits of our new ways of doing things, our new healthier ways of meeting our needs. And if we can reprogram that across 21 days by repetitively looking at the costs of the old pattern and the benefits of the new patterns, we're actually rebuilding and rewiring the emotional associations we have next to the addictive habit. And usually those two things together can go a very, very long way. So I know this is quite a long topic, but hopefully this makes sense. Also, if you want to actually dive into reconditioning addictive patterns of behavior or sort of seeing how you can help somebody in the process if they are in the space of trying to recondition some of theirs, you can check out our Overcoming Addictive Patterns of Behavior course for free for 14 days, just for a limited time. And I'll put the link for that down below. That link actually gives you access to everything at PDS in general. So you'll get access to all of our courses, all of our webinars. You can come in, join me on a webinar if you'd like. We've got pretty much daily webinars and peer support groups on a daily basis at this point as well, every day of the week except for Sunday. So lots in there, lots going on, but you can check it out. I would love to see you there. And thank you for watching. And if you're enjoying this channel, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos.